Dosm Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Dosm Rider here with my next top 5 video, this time top 5 Worst Kamen Rider Series, and this is my personal top 5 Worst Kamen Rider Series. Again, it's not a end-all be-all. I did some sort of calculation list just to make that clear, although it won't be clear to a lot of people, but I just wanted to make that clear from the beginning. Okay, as per usual, I sort of start off with honorable mentions with these, but they're kind of weird with the worst lists, as brought up in PR and Sentai, and I feel like there's a bit of confusion around how I do honorable mentions for the worst lists. And the way it works is, as opposed to best, where, or at least for me in these videos, as opposed to best, which is like these narrowly made it, or sometimes they're in my top 5 and they rotate out. For worst, when I mention honorable mentions, it's usually stuff that not that I think will is almost like just making the list. It's stuff that I feel like people would expect me to put in my top 5 worst, and I'm explaining why it's not. So it's kind of, I do it a little bit differently. For example, in top 5 worst Sentai, I mentioned Tokyuger in honorable mentions of, I guess I shouldn't even call it honorable mentions, but of one that I felt like people expected to be on my list because of how vocal I was about my dislike for it in the early days of it. So I just basically wanted to explain why, hey, I kind of like Tokyuger now, so it's not on this list. And then I got a bunch of comments being like, how could you put Tokyuger on this list? And the point of that list was that it wasn't on the list. So basically I probably just confused you more. So I only really have one thing to put in the honorable mention category, which would be Xaid, which at the time of this filming is not finished. I hope this video comes out before it's finished, because we're only in the early 30s right now, or mid 30s. So that's like 15 weeks or something, a little less or something like that. Maybe like more like 12. I don't know. But basically, I am just failing at life if I don't get this out before Xaid ends. But because I've been very vocal about my dislike for Xaid, although more recently it has been good and I have been enjoying it and there's things I like, but it's just kind of on the edge where it's a series I'm not that much of a fan of, and depending on how it ends, I could see it bumping number 4 or 5 on this list. But unlike Dino Charge, which I felt completely confident in putting on a worst list before it had finished both seasons, I'm not confident enough to put Xaid on it. So I felt like I wanted to address that just because there's a lot of discussion about my distaste for Xaid and all that, and I just wanted to clear that up. So now, actual list, 2 minutes into the video. So, oh, one other prerequisite, I'm sorry. Whoa, 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 you thought we were starting? We're not even close. No, I wanted to preface this by saying, with the exception of maybe the first 2 on this list, or the last 2, number 1 and 2, I actually don't have as much disdain for Rider Series, except for recently, with Xaid and stuff, as I do with like Sentai and PR, which is why, you'll see why I'm mentioning this a minute into the list, but it's like with Sentai I can easily be like, oh yeah, I hate Jetman, I hate G-Ranger, Power Rangers, I can be like, oh yeah, I hate Dino Charge, hate MMPR Season 1, like easy. But with Kamen Rider, some of the ones that are on this list, I'm like, well, this wasn't so good, but I don't hate it. So I just wanted to preface with that. Okay. Now, for real into the list. Actually, do you have time to talk about Japanese soda? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, for real. Number 5 on this list, Kamen Rider Kabuto. This might upset some people, and again, I prefaced with that spiel because I don't hate Kabuto. I think there's a lot to enjoy about it. I love the designs. I like a lot of the characters. It was kind of an enjoyable watch with some of the entertainment and bits and action, but it was overall, especially upon reflection, a really messy series where I never really fully understood where the plot was going. And then it was kind of that classic Rider thing in that era, like at the end, and then it just kind of came together in this really messy, weird way that just, you don't so much notice it at the time, and it's not until you finish the series and you're reflecting on it in the following days, and now in my case, following years, that Kabuto was kind of a mess. Especially near the end, but then as it went along too. And that's the reason, only real reason it makes this list. Like, it wasn't one of those series like I just mentioned for my Sentai and PR examples where I have like a huge distaste for them and I would have a hard time wanting to rewatch them. Like if you were to sit down right now and say you have to rewatch Dino Charge or Kabuto, I'd watch Kabuto no problem. I didn't find it to be a painful watch. It was just, in reflection, a messy show, especially compared to the shows that I do like, or the shows somewhere in the middle that aren't on the top best or worst. Okay, number 4, Kamen Rider Fives. This is basically the same case as Kabuto, and the reason it's above it is because I actually thought it did very well for itself more early on. It had that sort of classic thing I talked about from Rider Series like Blade, in the top 5 best, where it takes about somewhere between 13 and 16 for things to really get going. But once Heisei got going, it was actually pretty good. It was this really weird mix of, it had this really great, I have to watch the next episode factor, and it made you want to binge it and like really kept you invested. But it also had a very depressive vibe, which is pretty low-key compared to some depressing like actual shows I've seen. But it had this very somber vibe that often after I would binge 4 or 5, I felt like I just needed to go outside, which is unusual for me. So it was almost like this competing relationship of, oh man, I gotta see what happens next, or, you know what, maybe I should watch something else and cleanse my palate. But I was quite invested in it for a good chunk of time, and clipped through it pretty fast once it got going. But the reason it makes the list is because of the ending. It's kind of famous. There's a couple Rider series that are famous for their endings. Ryuki being another good example. Hibiki's rewrites and stuff like that. But this one is kind of famous for having a not ending. It kind of, I mean, ended but it didn't. And it kind of had a non-resolution to some of the things that were introduced. And similar to with Ryuki, I actually don't have as much of a problem with like what the main complaint people have is. Like with Ryuki, people have a complaint about the reset button ending. I honestly don't care about that quite as much as I do just the general mess the explanation of everything was. That's for another time. Ryuki's not on either list, spoiler alert. But Five's, like, I'm not as mad at the non-ending as I was about the whole last arc just suddenly doing like 180 moves for characters and plots, and it just, there was like this flow to where things were going, and then all of a sudden like, oh no, you're betrayed, you're doing this, and it didn't feel right. A lot of the character decisions didn't feel right. It felt like it had this even flow, and all of a sudden went jaggedy near the end, and it really bothered me. And it still had that good gotta watch the next episode factor up until the end, but it just felt like they had a really good thing going and messed it up. So it was like the overall last arc that sort of sealed it on a top 5 worst for me, as opposed to just the final moments. Because I think that if the final arc had been more consistent with what had been built up, I would have been fine with like the non-ending, if that makes any sense. Okay, number 3, Kamen Rider Decade. So this is probably one of the most, I'm trying to think of a better phrasing, but like traditionally hated on series. It's kind of like the butt of like a lot of jokes in Rider, whether it be like, oh, it's all Decade's fault, stuff like that, or even just quality of the series. Kind of like the overdrive in a way sometimes of it, or even just like the way people bash on the Transformers. It's kind of like the groupthink hate, like, oh, the fandom hates this, so I hate it too. And Decade was certainly messy, but again, it's not until the top 2 on this list that I really have actual dislike. Like, there's things I dislike about Decade, but I don't think it's that bad. I think it's just kind of a fun ride for the series up until the end. Again, my main complaint comes at the end, which I'll get to in just a second. But Decade basically, it's funny because I would recommend that more as like an introductory Rider series in terms of getting a taste of what each of the Rider suits look like. Some of their alternate worlds are like it, some of them aren't. Because people will say, oh, watch Decade or Gokaiger. I wouldn't recommend Gokaiger as a first series because I feel like to truly appreciate some of it, you need to at least see some of the series they're tributing. That's just me though. But Decade, it doesn't really matter because you don't really see actual actors till later in the series. But my point with that is I thought it was just kind of a fun ride, and I was kind of intrigued by what was going on. I found it to be a pretty enjoyable watch. There was a lot of controversy about like, oh, they didn't bring back actual actors, we're doing alternate worlds. And at the time, I was only, when it aired, I watched it as it was airing, I was only a few Rider series in. Now I've seen all the Heisei series and the Showa stuff. But, so I can kind of see why people were disappointed, but coming at it from a more fresh perspective to now, if like, let's say Decade was happening now, I would still be more fine with the alternate reality thing, because I liked seeing like the what if, like what they could think of different ideas for basically a Five show or a Hibiki show. And it also avoids the whole shallow anniversary stuff we've been doing, and kind of puts an interesting spin on it, and it lets you get a bit of a taste of it without spoiling anything. I don't know, I bring that up because it kind of reminds me of like the Fives and Ryuki endings, where I don't have as much of a problem with the main thing people complain about it. The two main things that put Decade on this list is, objectively, it is an overall messy series. Very inconsistent, probably one of the most inconsistent. But my personal reason why it made the list is the ending movie. Because the ending teased basically the wrap-up movie that was like dueled with Doubles movie, or it was like I don't remember, I think it was like one of those ones where it was like half stories and then they blended. I can't remember, it's been a minute. But the point was they showed like a trailer that looked really cool, and it was like, oh, it's gonna wrap it up, there's really cool stuff, there's like an evil Decade, and then the movie came out and it was nothing like the trailer. I mean, there's been movies like that, like real movies, but I mean, this was like as if there was like a Spider-Man Homecoming trailer, and you never saw any of the footage from that trailer, and the movie's completely different. It didn't wrap things up, and like the trailer made you believe that as messy as this is, we'll at least get like a 60% satisfying ending. We never got it, and not to mention the fact that they still have lingering questions. Like, I think there was an interview the last time Narutaki was on our screens. I think it was for one of the Taisen movies, and then he like appeared in the Tokyuger Gaim crossover, and like someone asked him like, well, when are you going to reveal who Narutaki really is? And they said it's too soon for that. That was literally 5 years after Decades ended. So it's like been a mess and continues to be a mess, and that's why it's on the list, even though I don't hate it quite as much as some other people. Okay, number 2. This was going to be the number 1 up till recently, and after I say this, you'll probably guess what the number 1 is, but number 2 is Kamen Rider Heisei. So, Heisei. This series definitely has its fans, but I'm just not a fan, obviously. The thing is, I actually really liked the beginning part of Heisei. I actually liked the whole vibe it laid down. I thought it was kind of fun, and I really enjoyed the way that they introduced the Kamen Rider Club. They gave them each their special moment episode. I liked the build up to it. I thought that was well done. But then after that, it just wasn't for me. It was kind of one note. I felt like they didn't fully utilize the Kamen Rider Club. I thought there was a lot of potential for storylines for them individually, as a group, amongst different friendships, and I felt like they weren't utilized well. The plot kind of meandered for a while, and then all caught up to itself at the end. Like, they realized, oh man, we gotta do this. We basically did like a weird Kengo special storyline after just coming off of, I guess it kind of started it, but after just coming off of sort of similar beats from previous series with like Philip, a bit Ankh, basically like a character being fake or an object. And so like the plot was just kind of messy near the end. It was like they had this good flow, and then it was really stagnant and weird and disjointed, and then it all caught up to itself, like I said. But my main problem with the series is Gentaro. The funny part about it is I thought I was going to hate him. I kind of liked him the first few episodes, because his whole thing is I want to be friends with everyone. My problem with that is I think there's some ideas for a good character there, but the problem is that he's one note. He's a cartoon. And that's almost an insult to cartoons, because there's cartoons that are leagues better than this. I mean that in like he's a caricature. He's just like, kind of like MMPR characters, or like PR characters of today. Actually, Toku characters of today in general, where if you were to just write down like a 3-sentence character description for Wikipedia, and that's their whole character. They never move past it. And my problem with Gentaro is he was so annoying, is that he responded to every situation the same. Whether it was a member of the Kamen Rider Club that had made a mistake and he said, I'll be your friend, or if it was a dude that just tried to murder a bus of people, I'll be your friend. That should not be the way it is. I get that they were trying to convey friendship and optimism, but I have a really hard time getting into a character when they basically are almost reacting like an NPC, in which you click on them, and every time you click on them, they say the same 3 things. In his case, it was 1. And I thought it was absolutely infuriating that he would basically want to be friends with murderers that were doing awful things to him and his friends and classmates, the same way you'd want to befriend like actual friends, or people that just made minor mistakes. At the very least, I think there was a way to balance that more and made him seem like an actual human that weighed things on a case-by-case basis. And it was just unbelievably frustrating, because it was just so one note. And that was really ultimately the crux of why I didn't like Heisei. And it was my number 1 least favorite for quite some time, until number 1, which is Kamen Rider Ghost. And I absolutely hate that this is my least favorite. I would have been happy for Heisei to keep that spot into my dying days. But Ghost, when it was first announced, I honestly would have never expected that it would be on this list, and that I'd be talking about it on this list in this video, because the general concept of it hit so many of my buttons. Some of my absolute favorite things are the paranormal and hoodies. If you don't notice, I wear a hoodie in almost every single video I'm wearing, even in the middle of summer. The hoodie is like my favorite thing, and I love the paranormal. And from the minute I saw its design, it became one of my favorites. Spoiler alert if I do a favorite rider design video, because it's not only really cool to have the hood aspect, but it simultaneously looks like a jack-o'-lantern and a skeleton, and not even just ghosts like regular Ore Damashi, like all the concept of like the historical figures. A lot of those designs look neat. Even just if I didn't like the designs, the concept was cool. Spectre looked cool, his forms look cool, Necrom looked cool. Some of my favorite across the board designs. Again, spoiler alert if I ever do a top rider designs. And the concept was there, and I was kind of hoping that it was going to go for more of a spooky vibe. Kind of like Kiva in terms of, Kiva wasn't necessarily oppressively scary or anything, but I thought it conveyed that sort of spooky horror, classic horror movie vibe with the score and the way it was shot, the cinematography, and I was hoping for that. But instead it was basically like yokai watchy, flashy, annoying crap that I don't like. And at the end of the day, they doubled down on the eyeball theme as opposed to the paranormal theme, and what I thought was like a ghost zone for paranormal things was like a weird alternate dimension. And aside from the fact that they botched the paranormal theme and they doubled down on the eye theme, the plot was just, it was all over the place to non-existent. I never knew where they were going. By the time I figured it out, which I never even really did at points, I didn't care. It's just, I don't even know where to begin with all that. I don't want to ramble too long because I did a whole video on my thoughts on Ghost. The point is, it was just messy. Spectre kept getting kidnapped, Ghost kept dying, I never knew what the stakes were. It was just a hot mess. Like I said, I never knew what was happening, and then when you did kind of find out and get answers, they weren't clear or you didn't care, and it just didn't feel right. And the characters weren't that great either. My favorite was probably Necrom, but he had a pretty generic, like, badass character redemption arc. The only different thing about him was the old lady with the takoyaki, but is that even really different? And Spectre just kept getting kidnapped. It felt like they really lost his purpose after he was initially a somewhat antagonist. And Ghost, I hated himself for similar reasons to Gintaro, where he didn't feel like a person. Like, I've seen a lot of people defend this with Takeru, and then another one I see this same argument come up with is the MMPR characters of, when I bring up they're not realistic. You know, they're just weird goody-goody ideals that aren't, nobody's really like that. Like, even the best people I've met or seen aren't like that. They're still human beings. And I've seen people say, well, they need to be like, almost like, godlike might not be the right word, but like idealistic, you know, idols that you're supposed to aspire to. They're not supposed to be relatable. But I really hate that. It's not even coming in now as an adult watching these shows. It's coming from a kid, from kid me, who hated that when I was little. I liked characters that I could see relatable traits in. I didn't like these because I would say, oh, that's a fake. You know, I don't like fake people. And when you get the MMPR Rangers or Takeru, it's fake. It's not genuine human connection and caring. It's like you're reading off of a Hallmark card. That's what Takeru felt like. He would just say what I call toku nonsense, which is a bunch of positive phrases mixed together that don't really make a full sentence. Like, I think at one point a villain said, what's your motivation? And he's like, finding out people's feelings and passing on those feelings to the future. I'm like, that's nonsense. You just said nothing. Like, I hated it because all he said was, he's basically like if someone's character on a sitcom was saying generic inspirational Hallmark or Facebook quotes, but they were all jumbled up and they made no sense. I don't know if it was the lack of translation, like a translation mishap, or both, but it was awful. And it was just, and he was so unrealistically optimistic, kind of like Gintaro, where he was one note and he didn't feel like a person on a case-by-case basis. And that's why I come back to Kota from Gaim so often, is because I really liked him because he felt genuinely human in the stages he went through to becoming more heroic, and like the fears he went through at the beginning, and like his like righteous actions felt more earned because you saw him go through it, like the journey, and you saw like the character reasons behind why he was doing things. But for Takeru, it was just like, it was like a button. And like I said, there might be some translation issues with culture. Like, I know for sure, I feel like this happens so often, whether it be in toku subs or anime subs, that I see the phrase protecting smiles. That has to be like the correct translation, but I feel like we should ad-lib, and it should be like, I want to protect their happiness, because protecting smiles, as I've mentioned before, sounds like a dental practice slogan or something an insane person says. Insane person. Or a person that's insane with the dental practice. Like, protecting smiles just does not work here. But regardless, it just, I hate how much I dislike Ghost. And it's not even, it's funny because I almost have a more disdain for Fourze, but Ghost was just so bad that I'm almost apathetic. And it kind of pains me too, like I said, because it had the building blocks to be so great for me, because it had so much stuff design and theme-wise that could have been amazing. But anyway, that's it for the list. I don't want to go on too much longer for this bit because, as I said, I already did a Ghost series wrap video with a lot of my thoughts on it. But that is the list for this. I have finished top 5 best and worst for PR Sentai and Rider. Not sure where I'm going here for this. Probably something top Megazord suits, something PR Sentai. I'll probably jump around rather than do a consistent thing here where it was PR Sentai Rider. I'll probably just kind of do whatever I'm inspired to do. So look out for that. I might put up a poll on Twitter or something to see like 3 ideas that I have for next. But anyway, thanks for watching. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It's Dosm Rider, signing out.